So you want to beat Bretonians and Tomb Kings. Hello there, welcome back to the channel. It's Richie here, and this is Dowie After Dark. So today I want to talk to you about two of the big bogeymen in the meta at the moment, which is Bretonnia and Tomb Kings. These are the new poster children for Games Workshop, so it's nice to see that they're coming out the back pretty strong, but unfortunately some people have been struggling playing into them. And today I would like to give you some hints, some tricks, and some tactical advice on how to beat these armies going forward. This is mainly for the Dwarven players out there, but I think that some of these tips can be taken forward into some of the other armies as well. Both of these two armies have completely different play styles. One of them is super fast, super agile, very mobile, and 360 charge arcs, and the other is about winning the grind, bringing their models back, and just outlasting you while pelting magic at you. So how can you build an all-round force that can deal with both of these armies, considering how different they are from each other and how differently you're going to have to play into each one? You can use the same army into both of these, but you're not going to be able to use the same tactics, because if you just charge straight into a Bretonian lance, you're going to die, and if you sit back into mortuary cult, they are just going to shoot you from afar and whittle you down. As I've just come off my video with Luna, I'd like to talk about the Bretonians first. Now, they are very strong at the moment because of their ability to deal with T6 monsters and also the 360 charge arcs. Now, there is a lot that we can do in our defense against Bretonnia. One of the best ways to start is to create a castle. I know some of you say that this is a boring way to play, but you don't have to play all of your games like this, but this is a very good way to play against those dastardly Brets. Find a corner on the battlefield that potentially has a hill or a wood, or that you can anchor your force against a building, and then castle there, have your range units at the front, so they're going to have to charge and weather the storm of your shooting for the first couple of turns at least. As long as you've created an impregnable castle where those Pegasus Knights can't just jump over you, charge you from the rear, or come around the flanks, then you should have a really nice time and be able to actually push back into this meta army. For that shooting, I would suggest lots of strength 4. The reason that I say strength 4 is because with the Lady's Blessing, they get a +1 to their ward save from shooting that's above strength 5. So if you pepper them with lots of strength 4, which is wounding the knights on 3s or the Pegasus Knights on 4s, you can do lots of damage because they are getting a worse ward save, and you should be able to tear through lots of knights. This is definitely something to think about, because I know a lot of armies at the moment aren't running too many of the handgunners, but I've personally found that handguns go really nicely into Bretonnia, or especially with Burlock or an expeditionary force where you don't have to worry about too many negatives to hit. My next bit of advice into this army is going to be to fight against the Green Knight. We all know what he can do. He can pop out of woods. As long as he's an inch away from you, he can just pop out. So a good tactic against the Green Knight would be to have a unit of rangers and create a circle and fill up the wood. As long as he can't fit, he can't pop out that wood. So have a nice bit of backfield defense with some rangers in skirmish formation blocking that wood, maybe with a combat unit inside the wood, so if the knights try and charge you into it, then they're taking the worst dice and also taking dangerous terrain tests if you're playing with dangerous terrain in those woods. So that's a really nice way to stop him from coming into your backfield. And an offensive way to play against the Green Knight would be by taking magical weapons. So putting a magical weapon onto your unit champions is always quite good. Or if you've got an anvil on your back line, just giving that anvil a simple rune of cleaving can really help deal with him. Because the Green Knight will probably try to go something that looks like an easy kill, and an anvil definitely looks tastier to kill than a big block of dwarves. Because it's ethereal, if it loses combat, it then loses the amount of wounds that it loses combat by. So you won't normally see a Green Knight charging into a big block of dwarves. This then leads me into my next point, which is always going to be you need combat res. Those big static 7 or static 6 combat res blocks really help when you're playing against Bretonnia, because they don't actually have access to too much stuff that will give them high combat res. Those lance formations, while giving them the +1 combat res from the lance and close order, don't offer too much combat res unless they have lots of models in the unit, because they don't get a rank bonus until they're in a unit of 10. Normally people will be taking the min-size unit of knights. They'll be mainly putting their points into the Pegasus Knights and their heroes, or if they're playing exiles, into the bombards as well. You can also capitalize on this by taking the Rune of Hesitation. This is an amazing banner rune against lances because it really neuters them. Because normal knights of the round charging into you will only be strength 3, those Pegasus Knights will only be strength 4, and there'll be no AP coming from those attacks. So suddenly you're there with the anvil buffs off onto your combat unit, you've got a 3-up save, re-rolling hopefully, and then you'll be able to do some damage back, hopefully out combat res them, and then pursue them, and then get them stuck in a grind, which is exactly where Bretonnia doesn't want to be. Something else you really need to worry about once they're in combat is the Dukes and the Barons. They have access to Killing Blow, rerolls to hit. They are just very, very good. They can also have a 2-up save, rerolling 1s, which is very similar to our Kings or Thanes that we can create as well. Something we can do to counter this is by taking the Rune of Preservation. You take the Rune of Preservation, the Rune of Gromril, You offer out a challenge and hopefully that Duke or Baron will accept. And then once they're locked in combat, hopefully that Duke or Baron won't be able to do many wounds to you and you can just win in combat res. And then if you get some lucky dice, you'll be able to roll straight over them. Or if they flee out into the open, you're then open to shoot them with your Iron Drakes, your cannons, or anything else that you want to pelt into them. If you've been struggling to the Exiles list with their bombards, there's quite a nice way that you can counter these. Now, they work the same as normal cannons, so if you've got big blocks of infantry, then they're going to shoot straight through and hit everyone in that rank in a straight line. You can minimize the amount of wounds that are done to you by making yourself as thin as possible. I'm not suggesting line hammer here, but if you've got a big unit of, say, 20 warriors, maybe take them 10 wide with just one rank. That's going to minimize the amount of wounds that are done to you with the bombard, and then more dwarves are going to survive. Making sure that they don't have lines into your flanks as well, so try and march up towards them or just try and weather the shooting. If they can only kill 2 dwarves a turn, those bombards are not going to win them the game. Another thing that you can do is by taking grudge throwers. I know I go on about grudge throwers all the time, but these are absolutely amazing to deal with the bombard. Now you sit these out of line of sight so they can't be targeted by the cannons, and then rain death from bombardment onto them, and hopefully you get a lucky shot. Roll a 3 on the damage, and then you're doing 4 wounds to that bombard and knocking it out of the game. A way that you can do this is by hiding them behind scenery. So you can hide them behind buildings so they can't be targeted at all. Woods, you're going to have to be a little bit more careful about this because the enemy cannons can pick a point just before the woods to try and hit through the woods. But if you back far enough, then the cannonball won't be able to reach you on that bounce. Or if you've created a nice layered defense in your castle, hopefully the cannonball won't be able to reach you. Once you've dealt with the bombards, then those knights are going to have to try and come to deal with you. Because if you've managed to kill 2 bombards and they've only killed 2 or 4 dwarves, then suddenly they're going to be losing on points. So they're going to have to try and engage with you on your terms. This leads me on to my next point, which is trying to make them overcommit. A Bretonian player will always be looking to try and take the easiest points. So potentially creating a bait unit out in the open, which then if they perform an overrun or they get stuck there, then you're going to have a good charge or you're going to get some really good shots. So potentially having a minimum unit of rangers up in the midfield, so that no overrun will be able to hit your lines. But if the rangers get destroyed, then a unit of Iron Drakes can shoot into the unit that killed them. Then that is a nice trade of those 55 min points of rangers. Something that I would definitely suggest that works really well into Bretonnia is Iron Drakes. I know that they get a better ward save against a strength 5, but the amount of shots that you can do, especially with the grenade, is absolutely amazing. I do see a lot of Bretonian players that don't run the banner that stops stand and shooting. So if they're not running that and they're just running the Vanguard banner to try and get a first turn charge and they overcommit, then suddenly you can do an absolutely massive amount of strength 5 shooting, which is wounding most of them on 2s or the Pegasus Knights on 3s. Now, if you get some lucky 6s as well, you're going to be basically going through their armor. So this is quite a nice tactic to get rid of them as well. Starting with the age-old tactic of having your Iron Drakes up front. So suddenly they're going to have to charge into them, weather the stand and shooting, and then you pop through and then you're fighting with your close combat units. If you don't have access to Iron Drakes, I would really suggest Gyrocopter spam in the X-Force. What you can do is just stay just out of charge range of those Pegasus Knights while shooting them with those clatter guns. If you have a unit with steam guns, flying right up out of arc of those Knights of the Realm and just shooting them with the steam gun, you can actually take out a whole unit of them with the steam gun. They are really, really good into Bretonnia. But you really need to deal with those bombards before you send your gyrocopters out there, because unfortunately they will pop 1 or 2 a turn if they can get a good line. If you can win that early range battle, so suddenly you've got extra points than they have, and suddenly they can't reach out and do damage to you from a distance, they're going to have to try and overextend and charge into you. And this is what we want. As Dowie players, we really want those knights to charge into us, take all of those wounds from stand and shoot, and then we can win on static combat res. If you can force that to happen, you're in a much better standing to win that game. I know some people don't like playing into Bretonnia, but I absolutely love it. It's always a really fun game, and it's always good when you can absolutely destroy a Bretonian army. Sorry, Luna. So in recap, you need magical attacks to deal with the Green Knight. You need the grudge throwers or the cannons to be able to deal with the bombards, but I would suggest cannons over that, because unfortunately your cannons would need line of sight and their bombards are better than ours, which is slightly unfortunate. Then the Rune of Preservation to stop the killing blow from the Duke or the Barons, Strength 4 shooting to get around the ward saves, make them overcommit, Iron Drakes into the Pegasus Knights, and then castle up and create a good defensive position that they're going to have to overcommit into. And then you should be able to beat those dastardly Bretonians. For the Karazhan Corps. So next up, I'm going to talk about an army that I know a lot of people have been struggling into, and that are almost becoming one of the big bads of the meta at the moment, which are the Tomb Kings. Now, some people can have some really unfun games into these, and I personally have had some absolute slogfests into these armies. Now, for me, I think the Mortuary Cult list is super strong at the moment, and also, I'm not going to talk about the army that's 180 skeletons with the chariot heroes in it, shooting poison out, because I personally think that that will get banned from events going forward. And I think if you rock up with that list just for a casual game at home, then unfortunately you're a bit of a dick. So I'm not going to talk about any tactics to play against that, because I don't think that that's a fun way to play Warhammer. I also don't think that that's going to be adopted into the tournament meta either. So, I mean, I could be completely wrong, but I personally not even going to speak about it because I don't think it's worth talking about. So when you're playing against Mortuary Cult, speed is the key. Now, I hear you saying, but we've only got movement 3, we've got short little stubby legs, but we do have access to some stuff that can make us very fast. So you're going to have to yeet at the Mortuary Cult, because they're probably going to be sitting back with their unit of 50 archers with poison, or some lines with Shabti bows and their double casket, double screaming skull catapult, and they're going to sit back and just shoot you and try and table you off the board with the magic and all of the shooting. So you can't stay still, you're going to have to charge straight into them. Now, the best way to do this is by picking something that's going to give you points once you get into it. Now, the best way to do this is by doing the yeet. For those of you who don't know what the yeet is, it's a combination of drilled, marching column, the cart, and the anvil spell to move twice. Also, with the Vanguard banner, that really helps as well. Suddenly you can get 27 inches forward and then charge something the next turn. The unit that I like to do this with into Mortuary Cult would be a semi-Death Star, so maybe a unit of 20, 25 Longbeards, Warriors, Hammerers, anything that you would like to use, whatever your flavour is. Have a Runesmith in there. I know there's been a lot of chatter online about people saying that Runesmiths are rubbish, but a Runesmith in your combat unit with 3 runes of spell breaking is going to stop all of that illusion magic that's going to stop you from charging. Now, if you played into Mortuary Cult, then you know that you need to stop certain spells. The reserve move needs to get stopped because they can get out of your charge arc. And also the columns of crystal and the mirages need to get stopped as well. If you don't manage to stop these spells because you don't have a Runesmith in that unit, unfortunately, you will lose the game, because your unit will be stuck there and they will just shoot you off the board. So a Runesmith is really, really important playing into Mortuary Cult. You need those runes of spell breaking. Also, a King is very helpful because of the Leadership 10. I do prefer to run Thanes as BSBs, but a King being Leadership 10 does give you a little bit of a leadership bonus when they are pelting you with all of those magical attacks while they're lowering your leadership with necromancy, then using those debuffs to do direct combat damage to you. Before you do the yeet, you need to pick the target you're going to go for. So if they have a line of Ushabti and a line of 50 skeleton warriors, you need to pick something that's actually going to give you points and be worth charging the next turn. I personally would suggest going into the Ushabti, try and kill the Ushabti, winning combat res, then hopefully they'll have a unit behind that, as you need to get points, because if you get stuck into the skeletons, you won't get any points that game. Another thing that you need to look out for is by looking at what you can overrun into. So if there's a line of Ushabti and then they've got the caskets behind, you charge into the Ushabti, kill them, overrun into the caskets, and then overrun and hopefully create a chain reaction that's going to win you the game. Now, if you got stuck in the skeleton archers, unfortunately, you're probably going to get stuck there for a couple of turns, even if you can deal with them. So you need to make sure that you pick a favourable target for the yeet. Tomb Kings, along with Troll Horde, are probably one of the only armies that Flaming is actually good into. Now, unfortunately, there's only a few units that are susceptible to flaming damage. So this would be the Chariots, the Bone Dragons, the Caskets of Souls, and some of the heroes. Now, mostly flaming is a bit of a nerf because a lot of stuff has extra saves to it, but against Tomb Kings, it suddenly starts to do work. Because if they take a wound against flaming attacks, then suddenly, on a roll of a 4-up, they take another wound. So it's potentially worth having runes of flaming onto those artillery pieces, so suddenly you're shooting them and you can do extra wounds. Just remember, one lucky hit with a grudge thrower or a cannonball into that casket means that that thing is dead. And then exploding can potentially kill all of the little characters around it, and that is definitely a win. One of the really strong things that Tomb Kings can do is have the Armour of Ages onto a Tomb Prince or a Tomb King on Dragon. Now what this does is it forces you to reroll your successful wound rolls into that dragon. Now the way around this is to shoot the dragon with only stuff that is strength 8, because you're going to be wasting those shots otherwise. If you're going to be wounding that dragon on 5s or 6s, then there's no point because it's just going to make you reroll. So the grudge throwers and the cannons that hopefully you've got the Rune of Flaming on to do those extra damage will do work into that model and hopefully be able to bring it down. Because if you're rerolling a 2 into a 2, then it's much more likely that you're going to be able to kill that model. If you're playing into the Mortuary Cult stand back and shoot you list, don't overcommit. What I like to do is just send one big unit up to do the work. I would send 1 or 2 other units up there as well to soak up a little bit of fire, and then while they're in marching column, reverse them out and get out of range. The worst thing that you can do is give away too many points. Also, you're going to need a little bit of backfield protection for either your anvil or your artillery pieces. Once those units are back on your backline, out of range of anything that can shoot them, then suddenly you can protect them against those scorpions that are popping out to kill you. Remember, the game's all about not giving up points, so if you can let that one unit that's got your heroes in it destroy a couple of units, get you some points while reserving your own points, then you are much more likely to win the game. Always be aware that those scorpions are going to pop up, so just make sure that you have something there that can actually deal with them, whether that be a Doomseeker, a Fireball Thane, or those units that have come back. Something that's also quite handy against Tomb Kings is having gyrocopters that can go around and kill the reserve moving archers that just stick around the back of buildings, pop out, shoot you, and then reserve move back. They don't do much damage, but what they can do is just chip wounds off stuff. And then in the late game, if you're stuck in combat against skeletons, potentially charge you in the rear. So a unit of gyrocopters flying around to destroy them really is handy. Unfortunately, there's absolutely nothing that we can do against Arise, which is where they can bring back models that have been killed this turn, and they can bring back absolutely loads every turn if they've got enough wizards. But what you can do to try and stop this is by engaging those priests, as they can't do it when they're locked in combat. Usually this would be horrendously difficult to do, but if you're running X-Force and you have lots of gyrocopters around, then you can actually do it quite easily by jumping over their lines and then engaging with the priests. It is quite a risky tactic though, and only do it if you think that you can get away with it. If you're playing into a Tomb Kings army that has lots and lots of chariots, a really good defense into this is going to be Iron Drakes. Those chariots have dry as dust, which means that any flaming damage into them is going to be doing extra wounds. Iron Drakes being on strength 5 means you're going to be wounding those chariots on 3s, and also your stand and shoot is going to really hurt them. Now, if you know you're playing against the massive chariot spam, it could be worth taking the Rune of Hesitation as well to stop those impact hits. But I do think that just a couple of unit Iron Drakes kicking around can deal with lots and lots of chariots. Remember your quick shot as well, so it doesn't matter how close they get to you, and you can properly deal with them. The grenade is amazing against them. For the toughness 6 monsters like the Necrosphinx, I think your artillery is probably going to be busy trying to deal with the Bone Dragon, or the artillery off against the Caskets of Souls or the Screaming Skull Catapults. So it's potentially worth just sending combat res units into the Necrosphinx to try and combat res it out. They're not actually that good in combat, so if you can weather the attacks and try and win on combat res, then you can make it crumble. Also, if you've got a king that has a Rune of Smiting, or a Thane that has a Rune of Smiting, so you can actually pop one of these in one round of combat. But if you're just running loads of gyrocopters, just stay out of its arc and you should be absolutely fine. Something you need to remember when playing into Tomb Kings is, yes, the dwarves are a grind army. That is normally how we win games. We get into combat, we get stuck there, we grind them out, and we can get some wins in. But against the Tomb Kings, they can grind better than us. They have the ability to bring models back, and then suddenly we can get attacked from the flanks and in the rear. So you need to remember this and only pick favourable charges. Unfortunately, if you get stuck in those big blobs of skeletons, you're not going to be getting out of that. So that is something you really need to watch. Keep it favourable, never ever get stuck, and always try to stop the reserve move spells. These are the things that make the army really fast. If you can stop those, suddenly those skellies are very slow. My last tip for playing against the Tomb Kings is to make sure that you're not too close to the edge of the board. If the Screaming Skull Catapult does a wound to you, it can make you fall back in good order. So make sure that you're over 5 inches away from the back of the board, because the dwarves have the rule Resolute, which is -1 to your flee rolls. If you're over 5 inches from the back of the board, you can't just simply lose one of your units straight away. This is something you need to watch out for when you're playing against double Screaming Skull Catapult, because they will try and do this turn 1 and just get some really easy points straight away. You need to watch out for this. So those are some tips and tricks into 2 of the big meta armies. I will be doing a full rundown on how to play into all of the armies, so keep your eyes peeled, they will be coming. How are you all enjoying playing your dwarves? I absolutely love the faction. I am currently working on a X-Force list that I'm going to be running early next year. It's going to be very different from my normal playstyle, and I'm really looking forward to using it. If you have any more tricks that you like to use going into these armies, please feel free to drop them down below. I would love to hear how you deal with these armies. And if there's anything that I've missed, please let me know. If you're looking to start a new dwarf army, then let's look no further than the sponsor of today's show, which is UK Resin Prints. Now, he is also offering a 15% discount if anybody uses the code DOWIEAFTERDARK. Link to this is found in the description down below. He has some of the best dwarf sculpts on that. Whether that be White Angel miniatures or Highland miniatures, all of your dwarf needs can be met at UK Resin Prints. I also have an affiliate link with Firestorm Games if you want to go down the Games Workshop route, so that would really help the channel if you could use that as well. I would also like to say a massive thank you to my new members on the channel: Tom Boller, Tim Pitcher, Close Order, and Magic Machek. Thank you so much for the support, it really means a lot. Now let's get those dwarves out and beat these meta armies. Let's show them what true dwarven steel and bullets can do. Take care, guys. See you later.
In the night of stone we march so bold, with our sharp and heart so cold. Through halls of old, our vengeance sparks in shadows dark. It's Dowie after dark. The grudge is held for years untold. letters kept where blood runs cold in caverns deep. The drums they roar will settle scores in Dawi lore. The grudge is held for years untold, in letters kept where blood runs cold. In caverns deep, the drums they roar will settle scores in Dawi lore. Under mountains, watchful gaze will end the feuds of ancient days. With iron will and spirit stark, will bring the light in Dawi after dark. Golden gems shall guide our fight through endless tunnels lost tonight. The hammer falls, the anvil sings, in Dawi's name our battle rings. From molten forges fuming red, our enemies shall quake with dread. In caverns grim our legends start, we strike as one in Dawi after dark. Under mountains watchful gaze will end the feuds of ancient days. With iron will and spirit stark, will bring the light in Dawi after dark. Under mountains watchful gaze will end the feuds of ancient